So, how many times have you been talking to a fellow weeb about some weeb-ass show that they're recommending to you and they hit you with the classic line,
"Yeah, it's a great show, but it doesn't really get good until like episode 76.
I don't know about you, but as someone who grew up during the explosion of Game Boys and handheld consoles in the late 90s, and then the rise of smartphones in my teenage years, not to mention that I've been an avid anime, video game, and comic book nerd pretty much my entire life, I feel like I've wasted enough of my time on meaningless bullshit. And I definitely don't have time to sit through a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood's worth of episodes waiting for a show to become worth watching. I tried that once. Never again. That's why I truly do appreciate shows like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. As the name would suggest, it's a truly unique and irreverent series that seems to pride itself on never being boring or predictable. From a cultural impact alone, it has to be considered one of the true GOATs of anime. And this is coming from a guy who never even finished part 3. Yeah, I'm not even that big of a JoJo's fan, to be honest. It's cool, I like it, but, and I know this is kind of a hot take, none of the later parts really live up to the bar that part 1 set. For me, I'm sure I'm in a very small minority on that, but despite not being that much of a fan of the later parts of JoJo's, I am a huge fan of the show's very first episode, because in my opinion, it's one of the best first episodes of any show that I've ever seen. And that's a bold claim, but please, allow me to back it up. Episode 1 is called Dio the Invader, and the episode fittingly starts on a dark and stormy night in which George Joestar, father of Jojo, has crashed his carriage carrying his wife and son on the side of a cliff. The only other people around are the mother and father of
Dio Brando,
and they find the Joestar family in peril. Believing them to be as good as dead, they decide to do the humane thing and rob them blind and leave them to rot. But George Joestar awakens in the middle of Brando's theft, only to mistake them for his saviors. In his last moments of consciousness before he passes out, he promises the
Brando
family that the Joestar family will forever be in their debt. We then get a nice little 12-year time skip during the opening credits and see that George Joestar and his son Jojo are doing just fine and living well in luxury and wealth. This is quickly juxtaposed with the scene of
Brando
family 12 years later, and we see the opposite of luxury and wealth.
and don't come back until you've found me some booze.
We also see Jojo and Dio interact with people outside of their family in scenes that display their true character. Dio beats a man in chess at a bar, and when he gets cocky and reveals his superiority complex, the man shoves Dio's face into his food and calls him a lowly whelp to put him in his place. Dio reaches for the fork beside him to stab the man, but quickly stops at the last moment. This very subtly illustrates Dio's pent-up aggression and frustration with being a lowly peasant and his need for violent release. Jojo, on the other hand, is shown heroically and selflessly defending a young girl from some bullies, despite him not having any skills or strength to actually beat up the bullies. So it's Jojo who instead gets beaten up once the bullies find out that he's the heir to the Joestar fortune. Despite their very different socioeconomic positions in life, it's very interesting to see that both Jojo and Dio share fathers who are somewhat disappointed in the men that they are becoming. Jojo's father believes that Jojo is not gentlemanly enough for high society, and Dio's father believes that Dio is too proper and smart for a life in the slums. It's their father's dreams for them that end up driving and motivating both characters. Dio's father wants to be rich, but he never attained it, so he pushes for his son to be the successful and ruthless con artist that he never could be. Jojo's father wants Jojo to be a great gentleman worthy of the Joestar name, so Jojo goes above and beyond to make himself into the ultimate gentleman. This all leads to a collision course where, after his father's death, Dio shows up at the Joestar mansion, ready to be repaid for his father saving George Joestar's life 12 years ago by being taken in by the Joestar family. In just 6 minutes, we get a full comprehensive backstory full of character dynamics, motivations, and interesting plot threads to come into play later. And it was all done in a very entertaining and gripping way. This is great storytelling. We get one of the most iconic moments in anime history, and PETA's most hated moment in anime history.
You got knocked the fuck out, man!
I know a lot of people seem to hate Dio specifically for what he does to Jojo's dog, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? He's a villain, and if you don't detest a villain's actions, then they're probably not a very good villain. Dio is an amazing villain, and this episode shows you why right out of the gate. I also want to take this time to say that I don't usually care about the dub versus sub debate. You You can watch whatever you want, however you choose to watch it. It makes no difference to me, but when it comes to JoJo, specifically part 1, I almost feel like it was made to be watched in dub, specifically English dub. There's something about North American voice actors performing lines translated from a Japanese screenplay in Victorian English accents that make part 1 hit on a whole different level for me. Like, just listen to this line from Dio in English and then listen to it in Japanese.
Listen, I may be a guest within your house, but I am not to be trifled with. In all things that I do, I am number 1. Look down your nose at me and you'll regret it.
ジョジョ、君の家に厄介になるからといって僕に威張ったりするなよな。僕は一番が好きだ。ナンバー1だ。誰だろうと僕の前で威張らせはしない。
I don't know, maybe it's because English is my native and only language, but the English dub just seems to suit the show's tone and aesthetic way more to me. But anyway, back to the episode. The next 3 minutes or so are dedicated to Jojo getting the kicked out of him by Dio both mentally and physically. This is all part of Dio's master plan to invade the Joestar home, get into the good graces of George Joestar while also making Jojo look like an unworthy fool, then usurp Jojo as the heir to the vast Joestar fortune. Jojo quickly realizes that Dio was trying to ruin his life, but no one seems to believe him due to Dio's charismatic way of manipulating others. While Jojo contemplates this, the same girl he protected from the bullies shows up and shoots her shot by giving Jojo some grapes and running off. And that worked. Huh. Anyway, Jojo and the girl, whose name is Arena, fall in love and begin a beautiful relationship that allows Jojo to momentarily escape Dio's tyranny. But of course, nothing good in Jojo's life can remain unsullied as long as Dio is around. Once Dio learns about this new relationship for Jojo, he eventually corners Arena on the street and proceeds to go mini Griffith and force himself on her to steal her first kiss just so Jojo couldn't have it.
Cause I'm a shoo-in for Hate of the Year.
Another quick side note. I know the JoJo poses have become a well-known meme at this point, but seeing as this is the first episode and introduction of the series, it has to be noted just how fucking hilarious they are. Like, Dio posing like this after kissing Arena and devilishly monologuing about how fiendish she is top-tier entertainment. JoJo quickly learns what Dio did to Arena from these generic-ass background bullies who just seem to be everywhere for some reason, and he confronts Dio about it. This confrontation quickly leads to a fight, and this fight starts out just as the last one did, with Dio easily fending off the attacks of Jojo, but as Jojo gets angrier, something changes. Jojo starts to overwhelm Dio. Once it's clear that he's losing the fight hand to hand, Dio resorts to pulling out a knife, showing that he really is willing to kill Jojo to get what he wants. But George Joestar finally comes down the steps to stop the fight. To his complete and utter shock, Dio lost to Jojo, but unfortunately for Jojo and unfortunately for dog lovers everywhere, the war was not over. Remember when I said that scene of Dio kneeing Danny the dog in the face was PETA's least favorite anime moment? Well, I kind of forgot about this one, where Dio burns Danny alive in a furnace just to get back at Jojo. That seems a bit extreme, but the nature of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is that every crazy or wacky thing that happens is quickly outdone by the next crazy or wacky thing. And these moments build on each other throughout each arc until you, the viewer, are left to ask, what the fuck is this show even about anymore? Even without a clear direction or a clear sense of what could happen next, every JoJo story is able to keep you entertained and enthralled with its narrative due to the great characters and insane moments. Episode 1 ends with Dio licking his wounds, realizing his own weaknesses, and plotting his get back on Jojo and how to finally enact his plan to take the Joestar fortune. Also, we see that the mask that's been constantly shown in the background of various scenes seems to have changed its shape since it was touched by Dio's blood, subtly introducing an air of supernatural mystery that will come to define the entire series. Oh, and then roundabout by the band Yes plays during the ending credits and it slaps. And that's the first episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So, why do I think so highly of it? Because I really value art with a unique style, and there has never been anything that I've seen before or since that feels like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The art style is so unique, the setting is so unique, the tone and the pacing, it all felt overwhelmingly good when I first watched it, and it still holds up today. I still remember after I had first watched this episode, I was really thinking that JoJo's would become my new favorite anime. I ended up being kind of wrong about that, but that's how good this episode is. The first episode of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has great comedy, action, mystery, originality, shock value, pacing, storytelling, and animation. As far as introductions go, it's damn near perfect. It's something that the nerdiest weeb and the most apathetic casual can both equally enjoy. From start to finish, it's simply the best.